like we always do at this time.
The idea behind this game was to take all the fun that rock and roll people were having with games like Rock Band and Guitar Hero and make it fit for the hip-hop audience, even though those rock and roll people look like just straight fools playing little kiddie plastic versions of real instruments. The main problem with it was that it was based on the idea of mashups, and it came out probably 3 or 4 years after the mashup craze had completely passed, and it completely neglects the fact that for every one good mashup, like the Jay-Z Beatles Grey album, there's like 1,000 bad mashups available on the internet, and this game lets you make some of those really bad mashups. 50 Cent Bulletproof is a third-person shooter from the PS2 era. It's a pretty solid game. You control 50 Cent, and then you have a team around you, which is predictably Tony Yayo, Lloyd Banks, and Young Buck, who was actually still part of the crew at the time. And then there's a bunch of cool cameos. Eminem, Dr. Dre, DJ Who Kid are in it. It's a pretty cool storyline. The graphics are really good for a PS2 game. Everybody in the game is decked out in G-Unit Echo clothing, which was in stores at the time. And you can just see that in all its velour and fleece and denim glory throughout the game. And overall, it's a pretty solid pickup. There's actually a sequel to this game that came out a couple years later called 50 Cent Blood on the Sand. It's not on this countdown, but I feel like I need to mention it because the premise is just so ridiculous. 50 and his crew are overseas doing a show in the Middle East. Their diamonds get stolen, and they have to go on a race through the Middle Eastern world to get these diamonds back. I don't understand how that would ever happen, how our government would let 50 Cent and G-Unit take on the terrorists, or why they'd be performing a show over there to begin with. So 50 Cent Bulletproof, really good. 50 Cent Blood on the Sand, not so much. One of the coolest and most different experiences I've had in gaming during the whole PS2 era was on Mark Echo's Getting Up. Yeah, the same Mark Echo from the clothing company. And obviously his designs are really influenced by graffiti, so what he put out was a game based on graffiti. And what this game did was you went around the city, it was kind of in the near future. Your character's name was Train, his tag was T-R-A-N-E, and your job was to put that tag up everywhere you could. You did spray paint, wheat paste, stickers, and just kind of get your name out there, get up in the graffiti world in that city when there was cops and other security people and rival gangs trying to stop you from doing that. So it's really a cool game. I haven't played a game like it since. They've been talking about a sequel forever. I don't know if we'll ever see that or not. But this is the commemorative set, which comes with not just the game, it comes with a CD soundtrack, and it comes with a graffiti kit, magic markers, a sketchbook. So if you really want to get involved in graffiti art, you can do that with this kit, which I don't think that's the way most people get involved in that lifestyle. But what this game really does, two things really cool. Number one, there's cameos by graffiti greats from the past that influence Mark Echo, and you kind of interact with them and see their pieces throughout the game. And number two, if you have no artistic ability or are just kind of scared to get involved in street art, or like me, both of those things, it lets you kind of experience that world. By the late 90s, everybody had an opinion on who the best member of Wu-Tang Clan was. And honestly, it's not an easy question to answer. All the guys are great rappers, and all the guys brought something so different to the table, it's hard to say one guy was definitively better than another guy in the Wu-Tang Clan. And there's a couple different ways they could have settled this. Number one, we could just look at tracks like Protect Your Neck or Triumph and see who did the best when they were given the same beat to work with, or we can look at discographies, who had the best solo career away from Wu-Tang. But no, that's not what they did in the late 90s. In the late 90s, they said there's only one way to settle this once and for all, and that's with arena-based kung fu fighting to the death in Wu-Tang Shaolin style for PlayStation 1. This game lets you control any of the 9 Wu-Tang guys and pit them against ninjas, samurais, each other, and just fight it out to the death. It's a pretty solid fighting game for the time. It came out in '99, so it's over 10 years old at this point, but it still holds up. And if you and your friends ever debated who was better, Method Man or Ghostface, not in a rapping standpoint, but over who could kill each other with swords or hammers or nunchucks better, you got to go track this down on eBay and get it. Def Jam Fight for New York is not only the best hip-hop game of all time, it's one of the best fighting games ever released. It came out on PS2 in 2004. It's got a ton of rappers, probably close to 40 different characters you can play as. A pretty cool storyline, great fighting mechanics. It's a fun game, and it takes a while to get through it. Probably get 8 or 10 hours out of the game if you play from start to finish. The backgrounds of the arenas are based on classic Def Jam albums, which is really cool to see, and the graphics are really sick for that time frame. So Def Jam Fight for New York is my pick for the best hip-hop game of all time. Quick footnote on that, Obviously it's the second in the trilogy of Def Jam games. The first one was Def Jam Vendetta, released in 2003. This game is not bad. There's not that many rappers to pick from, and it's a wrestling game, not a street fighting game. So you're kind of limited what you can do move-wise, because what you're doing happens in a wrestling ring and you're doing wrestling moves. That being said, at the time, it was awesome to control guys like Method Man, Redman, Keith Murray, Joe Budden in that environment. And then a couple years after Def Jam Vendetta on the PS3, Def Jam Icon came out, and this game is, again, it's good. It's nowhere near as good as Fight for New York was, mainly because they went outside of Def Jam with their picks for rappers, and a lot of those guys are honestly, a couple years later, not relevant anymore. And then, trying to take advantage of the 6-axis controller and the dual joysticks, the fighting mechanic is a little weird and hard to get used to. But overall, it's a fun experience. But as we wrap it up, the #1 hip-hop game of all time, Def Jam Fight for New York for the PS2.